government buildings. It's as if someone wants to erase our...
Celebrating 25 years of BET.
These jokers started showing up. I was like, no, you were here first. You can have it.
Nobody expected Tyler Perry to be the one to shatter the illusion. In a room filled with stars and staged smiles at the 25th BET Awards, it wasn't a rapper, a comedian, or a headline act that got people talking. It was Hollywood's quiet king, the man known for staying above drama, who stepped onto the stage and dropped a truth bomb so sharp it cut straight through the fairy tale. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't name names, but the silence between his words said everything. 4 years, Tyler Perry had been Meghan Markle's behind-the-scenes guardian angel, the one who gave her a home, paid her security, and asked for nothing in return when the royal world turned its back. But on that night, he made it painfully clear, even angels can get tired of being used. The crowd didn't gasp. They didn't need to. Everyone already knew who he was talking about. And what followed wasn't just awkward PR cleanup or trending hashtags. It was the unraveling of a brand Meghan had spent years crafting. Because what if the woman the world thought was silenced had simply run out of people willing to stay silent for her? When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped away from royal life in early 2020, they weren't just leaving behind titles and tiaras, they were stepping into the unknown, with no real home, no official security, and an entire media world waiting to watch them fail. The headlines painted it as a brave escape, but behind the scenes, they were cornered, isolated, and vulnerable. That's when Tyler Perry appeared, not in front of cameras, not in some grand announcement, but quietly. He offered them refuge in his $18 million Beverly Hills mansion, far from the flashing lenses and royal reporters. He didn't just give them a roof, he gave them peace. He paid for round-the-clock protection out of his own pocket. No contracts, no public credit, no strings attached. At the time, it felt like the ultimate gesture of friendship. Two people exiled from royalty, taken in by a Hollywood mogul who understood the weight of being constantly watched, constantly criticized. Perry didn't do it for fame. He already had that. He did it because he believed in them. To the public, he was the silent savior, the man who made sure Meghan and Harry could start over. But behind closed doors, something else was beginning to stir, a slow, subtle shift that even Perry didn't see coming at first. Because when you give without limits, you start to notice who never gives back. For a while, things seemed smooth. Meghan and Harry settled into their new life under Perry's roof, protected from the chaos they'd just escaped. And Perry, he kept supporting from the sidelines, financially, emotionally, and without hesitation. But the cracks didn't come all at once. They came quietly, in small moments that didn't feel like betrayal at first, until they did. According to insiders, the shift began with what seemed like a simple request. Meghan reportedly asked to use Perry's private jet for a personal trip. No discussion of costs, no concern about logistics, just a casual favor from someone who had already done more than enough. Perry paused, not because he couldn't afford it, but because something about the way it was asked made him feel off. There was no gratitude, no acknowledgement, just expectation. So, for the first time, he said no. And that's when everything changed. Sources close to Perry say Meghan didn't take the refusal lightly. What she saw as a minor inconvenience, he experienced as a wake-up call. It wasn't just the jet, it was the pattern, favors stacking up, appreciation drying out, and boundaries slowly eroding. What began as an act of kindness had turned into a one-sided exchange. And Perry, a man who built his empire on loyalty and hard work, started to feel something he never expected used. It wasn't anger at first. It was disappointment. And in Hollywood, that's far more dangerous. Tyler Perry isn't the type to air dirty laundry. 4 years, he stayed quiet, even as whispers grew louder behind the scenes. He brushed off comments from colleagues, ignored warnings from producers, and tried to believe the best in Meghan. But everyone has a limit, and Perry had finally reached his. It was the 25th BET Awards, a night meant to celebrate music, culture, and excellence, not drama. But when Perry stepped onto that stage, the room shifted. His tone was calm, his delivery measured, but his words, they landed like thunder. "I once gave someone my home, my help, and my heart," he said, pausing just long enough for the silence to grow heavy. And when they got what they needed, they disappeared. He never said Meghan's name. He didn't have to. The room already knew. Some folks, he added, borrow blessings like they're owed, but never return the favor. No camera cut to Meghan. There was no dramatic reaction shot. But online, viewers were already connecting the dots. It wasn't just a speech. It was a statement, and one that Perry had clearly been holding in for years. That quiet moment on stage became a turning point. Hollywood's nicest guy, the man who never speaks out, had just told the world he'd been burned, and by someone he once protected. The audience didn't hear rage. They heard resolve. And when someone like Tyler Perry speaks with that kind of finality, it's not about revenge. It's about finally telling the truth. The speech barely ended before the ripple effect began. Tyler Perry didn't drop names, but he didn't need to, and Hollywood got the message loud and clear. Within hours, phone calls were being made. Producers, investors, streaming execs, everyone suddenly had questions about what they'd just heard and who it was really about. And for Meghan and Harry, the timing couldn't have been worse. They had just started pitching a brand new documentary, one about power, independence, and rewriting the rules. It was supposed to be a comeback, a fresh chapter. But after Perry's speech, the tone around the project shifted almost overnight. One producer, who had already attended 2 planning meetings for the doc, reportedly pulled out just hours after the BET Awards aired. "I don't want to be involved in something that feels this toxic," they said. Another investor quietly withdrew, citing concerns about reputation risk. This wasn't about the content anymore. It was about the people behind it. Meghan's name, once seen as a lightning rod for progressive platforms and feel-good storytelling, was suddenly raising red flags. The narrative had flipped, and it was happening in real time. Inside Archwell, panic set in. Meghan's PR team went into overdrive, reaching out to major media outlets to reframe the story. They floated exclusive interviews, behind-the-scenes access, even suggested a podcast response to Perry's misunderstanding. But none of it stuck. In fact, it only made things worse. The harder they pushed, the more desperate it looked. And the more desperate it looked, the more people started asking, what exactly were they trying to cover up? For years, the stories had lived in whispers, passed between assistants, echoed by producers, hinted at in meetings no one dared record. But once Tyler Perry broke his silence, something shifted. People started talking. Friends close to Perry revealed he hadn't planned to go public. He'd agonized over it for months, torn between protecting his own reputation and staying loyal to someone who had stopped treating him like a friend long ago. What pushed him over the edge wasn't the private jet. It wasn't even the mounting entitlement. It was what came next. Meghan, according to sources, had started using his name, casually, strategically, in private business circles. During a 2024 pitch to a high-level funding group, she reportedly implied that Perry was a silent backer of her new media venture. He wasn't, and he hadn't given permission for his name to be mentioned. When that story got back to Perry, he was livid. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was reputation theft, and for someone as protective of his legacy as Perry, that crossed the line. That's when he decided, no more silence. And as soon as he stepped forward, others followed. A former assistant from Meghan's own team described the work environment as emotionally exhausting. Staff were expected to show unwavering loyalty, manage impossible standards, and never question the narrative. One mistake, one differing opinion, and you were cut off. A producer who worked with the couple on their failed Spotify deal claimed that Meghan's obsession with perfection and control smothered every idea. She didn't want collaborators, they said. She wanted yes men. Even Oprah's inner circle, once one of Meghan's most visible support systems, began to pull back. Sources revealed that communication between their camps had gone cold. No more friendly calls, no public support, just silence. And that silence was starting to speak louder than any headline. Meghan Markle built her brand with precision. She was the misunderstood duchess, the outsider silenced by centuries of monarchy. She became a symbol of resilience, of rebellion, of female empowerment. Every interview, every photo shoot, every documentary carefully stitched together a story of survival. But now, the seams were splitting, and the narrative was unraveling in plain sight. What made this downfall different was the source. These weren't anonymous tabloids or clickbait headlines. The voices exposing cracks in Meghan's image came from inside the room, people who had worked with her, protected her, supported her. And the public noticed. On social media, hashtags that once championed her started turning. Former supporters began resharing clips of Perry's speech with captions like, "We should have seen this coming." Memes flooded in, some mocking, some scathing, painting Meghan as entitled, performative, or worse, calculated. Even the mainstream media started hesitating. Publications that once jumped to publish glowing features on her projects began pulling back. Editors waited. Writers paused. Nobody wanted to stake their credibility on a brand that looked like it was in free fall. Meanwhile, polls revealed a dramatic shift. U.S. public support for Meghan and Harry had dropped over 30% in the past year alone. And in the UK, where skepticism was already high, the fallout felt complete. The bigger the platform, the quieter the support became. Because the question was no longer, is Meghan misunderstood? It was, how much of her story was ever real? The public perception was crumbling, but behind the scenes, the damage was far more measurable. Inside the walls of Archewell, Meghan and Harry's once celebrated nonprofit and media hub, the vibe had shifted from visionary optimism to quiet panic. Multiple sources close to the foundation confirmed what rumors were already suggesting. Budgets were frozen, new hires delayed, internal projects quietly shelved. The money was still there for now, but the momentum, that was gone. Streaming giants who once rushed to sign them were now reevaluating. Netflix, their biggest backer to date, reportedly began reconsidering future deals. Not because the content was bad, but because the public no longer trusted the people behind it. Meghan's team had tried to spin it as creative evolution, but internally, it was damage control. Every dollar had to be justified. Every pitch felt like walking on eggshells. For someone who had built her image on being a powerful, independent voice, a woman who had risen above the crown's restrictions, this wasn't just a PR nightmare. It was a full-blown identity crisis. Her core narrative, feminist icon, fearless truth-teller, self-made mogul, was now being dissected, doubted, and dismantled in real time. And even longtime fans, the ones who stuck by her through every controversy, had gone quiet. Because it's one thing to be criticized by strangers. It's another to be abandoned by those who once lifted you up. In the days that followed Tyler Perry's speech, Meghan reportedly fired off a storm of texts. Not apologies, not explanations, accusations. She accused him of betrayal, humiliation, of damaging her family's legacy. But Perry didn't respond. Not then, not later. His silence, after years of support and sacrifice, was deafening. And that silence spoke volumes. Friends close to Perry confirmed what many had already suspected. He had been emotionally cornered for years, pushed to give more, pressured to stay loyal, constantly expected to protect someone who treated loyalty as a transaction. Once he walked away, others felt safe enough to speak too. A former publicist revealed that Meghan's team had attempted to blacklist journalists who asked unscripted questions, insisting every narrative stay under her control. A consultant at Archewell claimed Meghan routinely ignored strategic advice unless it fit her personal vision. One former staffer put it bluntly, gratitude wasn't part of the culture. Control was. Even major studio execs, the kind who usually stay far from controversy, began to weigh in. Quietly, of course, but their message was clear. Meghan wasn't just difficult to work with. She was unpredictable, untrusting, and exhausting. One insider described negotiating with her team as playing chess with a mirror. Nothing reflected back honestly. And then came the numbers. A poll taken just weeks after Perry's speech showed support for Meghan and Harry in the US had plummeted by over 30%. In the UK, they were already labeled as opportunists. Now, the backlash had gone global. Through it all, Harry remained mostly silent. Some say he's trying to repair what's left behind the scenes. Others believe he's simply burned out, tired of fighting, tired of losing allies, tired of watching the empire they tried to build fall apart piece by piece. But Tyler Perry, he didn't lash out. He didn't go on a press tour. He let one carefully worded speech do all the damage. And that's what made it lethal. Because it didn't just expose a moment. It exposed a pattern. One that had been whispered about for years, and now could no longer be ignored. Meghan Markle was once exiled from the royal family, silenced, scrutinized, and cast out by an institution built on image over individuality. But Tyler Perry's quiet, devastating reveal showed the world something no crown ever could. You can be exiled again, this time by the very people who once believed in you. This wasn't a scandal manufactured by tabloids. It wasn't royal gossip or media spin. It came from friends, allies, protectors, people who once opened their homes, their hearts, their reputations, and were left with nothing but silence when it mattered most. In Hollywood, reputation is everything. And when someone is respected, measured, and unproblematic as Tyler Perry decides he's done protecting you, the culture listens. What began as one man's honest reflection turned into a cultural reckoning. Because the truth is, stories don't fall apart from outside pressure. They collapse when the people holding them together finally let go. And that's exactly what happened here. Tyler Perry didn't expose Meghan Markle. He revealed who wasn't willing to stay quiet anymore.